All right, go ahead and tell me who you are and why I'm talking to you.
I'm Ed Brubaker, and I wrote Angel of Death that stars Zoe Bell, which is an internet show slash feature. It was designed to be shown as both episodes and fit seamlessly together as a feature film, too. So
Okay, so from the outset, it was meant to be kind of chunked up and released online and then bundled together.
That was the big challenge, which is I think one of the reasons they approached me as someone coming from comics is because we're used to writing episodic stories. I mean, I just wrote a 18-chapter Death of Captain America storyline, for Marvel, so it was like we're really used to telling longer stories that have a lot of cliffhangers and a lot of oh shit moments and things like that. So that was when John approached me, the producer John Norris. He was looking to do something like that would be a feature film to be shown on the internet episodically. And he thought a comic book writer like me would be perfect for that, just because
serialized.
The serialized nature of most of my work. So I love that challenge of trying to do something that worked both ways. Like that each episode would hopefully be satisfying on its own, and yet be part of this larger whole that would be able to be, done as like a feature and released on DVD and through iTunes and the various. So it was kind of designed to try to mine every way you could on the internet, like do the episodic stuff because the cell phone market really likes the shorter episode kind of stuff. But people when they're sitting there on their laptop will watch Dr. Horrible for 45 minutes. Like I watch Larry Sanders on Crackle like almost daily because I'm like, hey, they've got Larry Sanders on this thing.
I didn't even realize they had Larry Sanders on there.
They've got like 42 episodes up.
Oh, that's fantastic.
Yeah, no, they're great. Yeah. Oh yeah, Hank's
Hey now.
nervous break. Hey now. Yeah, exactly. No, and there's all this, and I mean, I'm finally to the point now where like if I miss an episode of The Office and I forgot to TiVo it or whatever, I watch it the next morning on Hulu.
Yeah.
Like so I feel like these barriers are being broken down with the time barriers now, and I thank God for Joss Whedon for that, because I really feel like he with Dr. Horrible showed that people will sit in front of their computer to watch something for longer than 3 minutes.
Sure.
A couple of years ago, everybody was telling me, you can't do anything on the internet that's longer than 3 or 4 minutes. I'm like, really? Because by the end of 3 or 4 minutes, if it's still good, I still want to see more.
Yeah, let's talk about that for a second. So, you've done serialized storytelling, 22 pages typically for a story.
Yeah.
Was there any difference in telling a story for the web versus telling a story through a comic?
Not that much, really. I mean, I was writing for a budget. Like, I knew that. I knew the budget of it.
What kind of budget were you writing?
We had $1 million budget.
Okay, and how many episodes are there?
It's 10.
Okay.
10 episodes, about somewhere between 90 and 100 minutes, I think.
Okay.
And it felt a lot like comics. I learned a lot during the writing process by talking to the director a lot about stuff, because I'm like, well, I want to do this. Can we afford that?
Okay.
Like that was the conversations that were really interesting to have, because I'd never written a film that had been made. And, I know there are a lot of filmmaking is, hey, we can't afford to do that. Can we do something else?
Sure.
So that I thought was a really fun part of the process. But it really was, I think the difference in having to do it that it's episodic is I think we end up having more story than the average like 90 to 100 minute film would have, because each episode has to contain a certain amount of stuff and feel like something that's satisfying on its own.
Sure.
And so when we were done with it and I reread the script and everything after like my third draft, I read the whole thing and I thought, this is really packed. Like there's not a wasted moment in this thing. And Paul, the director, was saying the same thing. He was kind of like, wow, there's actually no scenes I can't film. Like I have to film every moment of this. And there was a couple things we didn't have time for, and we ended up having to do pickups later, because it was like, well, this thing doesn't work without these 2 scenes.
Yeah.
So it was very tight. And I think, and coming from comics, it's like, those tight 22 pages, so it was great to know for me too, because of the velocity of the project. I mean, it was greenlit before I started writing. They had a shooting date set before I even was like halfway done with the script.
Now, did they come to you with the idea, or was this an idea that you had just kind of kicking around, or is it something you came up with specifically for this project?
It was, part of the idea was something that had been stuck in my head literally since like 99 or 2000. I saw this documentary on PBS where it was about an ER, I think in Austin, Texas, somewhere in Texas. And this guy walks in and he's got a knife sticking out of the top of his head, and his neighbor had stabbed him in the head during a fight. And he just walked into the ER. He's walking and talking. He was fine, but he had a knife in his head. And basically what they did is shaved his head and pulled the knife out.
Yeah.
And did a bunch of tests on him, and he had a complete recovery. And I thought, that's an amazing visual, and that always stuck in my head. And then the producer, John Norris, had approached me about optioning this book I do called Criminal, and I couldn't do that at the time, and so he suddenly dangled Zoe Bell. He's like, well, we've been talking to Zoe Bell, you know, and I was like, oh my God, like, I'm a huge Xena fan, I love Double Dare, you know, Death Proof, like, and I just thought, well, the idea of being able to work with Zoe Bell is amazing, so I was like, well, why don't I just come up with something new? Like, let's just pitch an original thing to Sony, and that night I wrote up the pitch for Angel of Death and sent it in, and, you know, within 2 weeks I was being flown down to LA for meetings and meeting Zoe, and, you know, it just went like that. It was really quick, and, you know, there were very few hoops to jump through to get it done. I think everybody at Sony really liked the idea of the project, and they were really trying to find something like this to put on Crackle. Yeah. You know, and that was the thing, is people are still trying to figure out what to do on the internet. You know, they're trying to figure out how to make the internet work as an entertainment provider.
Well, let's talk about that a little bit. What kinds of online video do you watch? Do you watch any web series? I mean, you mentioned Dr. Horrible and
like
Hulu.
The Guild a lot.
Okay.
The one Felicia Day does about the online gamers. Children's Hospital, I think, is really, really funny. The Rob Corddry one, that's like a parody of every hospital show ever. Yeah.
Do you think the serialized format works? You know, comics have been around for a long comics have been around for a long time. Yeah. Right? So people are used to that kind of.
Well, and serialized fiction is, you know, goes back so far. I mean, that's how Dickens and Dumas and all these guys publish their stuff. I think, you know, I'm hoping it does. I'm curious to see what our response will be, you know, because I had to keep thinking of it as a movie the whole time, even though I knew, well, this is episode 1, this is episode 2, like, so I'm really curious to see how people will react to a completely serialized thing. I hope well, you know, because I'd like to do more stuff like this, because I think it's really fun, and, you know, like I said, it's great to pack in that much story into an 8 to 10 minute chunk of time.
Sure, and the beginning starts off with a bang. I mean, you know, it starts off, what was kind of, you know, there's a lot of concern that you have to hook people quickly.
Yeah.
So was that something conscious, or was that something like, I got to stick in something at the beginning to get things moving, or is that just sort of organic to?
Yeah, really just organic at this point, because I've been writing, you know, most of my life, so it's like, that's like that early screenwriting rule. It's like you gotta hook people within your first 10 pages, or they're never gonna get to the 11th page. So I always knew what the end of what that was in the pitch, like, and that's the end of episode 1. She's driving away in a car with a knife in her head, you know, and it's like, and everybody will want to see episode 2 to see how the hell are they getting that knife out of her head, you know, or are they?
And last question: now that you've done one web series, do you think you'll do another?
I hope so, yeah. I'd like to do more of this stuff. It's really a lot of fun, and it's great because, you know, the internet is this new frontier, and everybody's rushing to try to get product for it, and it feels like I keep saying, it kind of reminds me of the early 70s in film, where they would just give you $1 million in Lee Marvin, and, you know, so we got $1 million in Zoe Bell.
Awesome.
You know, and the red camera. The red camera makes $1 million look like 10.
Yeah. All right, well, thank you very much.